Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Good news, I have got just the most splendid cup of coffee today. I pulled the perfect shot, it's so well balanced. Have I ever told you how much I love coffee? So over the years, and especially over the last few months, so many people have noticed and pointed out in the comments how when I learn languages, I actually don't do a lot of speaking to native speakers. I don't go out there and aggressively, create opportunities to speak. I don't usually use online tutors or, find language exchange partners. It's just not something I do a lot of, right? And so many of you have rightly pointed this out and asked, so how do you develop these speaking skills in different languages if you're not practicing talking to people on a regular basis? And so I thought this would be a really cool video to talk about, why I typically don't do that a lot until later on. And of course, more importantly, talk about how I still develop pretty strong speaking skills, mostly by myself, so that later on when the opportunities come organically, I'm ready and I can really engage in some fantastic conversations with native speakers and just other people who speak the language. That's all coming up. Of course, if you enjoy this video, please do give it a like and consider subscribing. And I also have a Patreon page where I'm posting a lot of exclusive content. So if you're into that, check it out. Link in the description. Okay, so first of all, I want to really quickly explain that, speaking to native speakers or other people who speak the language, it's not something that I avoid, right? So I don't actively or deliberately avoid speaking to people. It's just that I don't, create those opportunities myself. I don't book online tutors. I don't use apps that can help me find exchange partners. And the primary reason for this is honestly that I've always just found that I can be really independent when it comes to developing that kind of really basic level of fluency. I always talk about how for me, fluency is a really wide spectrum and there are many, many levels of fluency. So when I say that like really basic level, I'm talking about getting to the point where you can freely express yourself, right? There'll be mistakes, you're gonna get stuck sometimes, but you can express your ideas, you can talk to people, and if you get stuck, you can typically find a way to still express your idea one way or another. And so yeah, when I was learning Japanese, there was an interesting situation where I was a student at university, I was learning Japanese, and we had like 5 exchange students from Japan. And what happened back then is that like every person, it seemed, in the whole Japanese department was like, I would say aggressively trying to like find these 5 Japanese exchange students all the time and like trying to practice Japanese with them. And I always felt weird about that because in my opinion, these people came here to learn English. They're here to practice English. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. They're students here for a whole year. It's really special. And so if I meet one of these people organically, I'm more inclined to try to help them with their English or just talk to them as a normal person in English, right? I'm not gonna try to force them to speak Japanese with me. And the funny thing is that most people in the Japanese department at my university, basically nobody could even converse in Japanese. And so on one hand, it's like you're aggressively trying to find these 5 people who can speak Japanese, but then you're not even able to have a proper conversation with them anyway. And so I just made a decision at the time that I would just try to develop those skills by myself. And I knew that once my Japanese became pretty good and I was conversational, I knew that those opportunities would come, and when they did, I'd be ready. I'd be able to actually engage. And that actually did happen later on in my university years. I kind of ended up being the guy that, exchange students would come to when they needed help and when they were just exhausted of speaking English and they wanted someone that could speak Japanese with them and who they could express themselves naturally with. And we had some wonderful conversations, and we really bonded over, discussing the struggles of living abroad, things like that. So that's when it all started, and the same thing happened in French, Italian, basically every language I've learned. I've always just developed my speaking skills pretty independently. And because, again, the thing that I really look forward to when it comes to speaking to other people in a foreign language, I look forward to those really genuine, authentic moments of, again, like discussion and like bonding over sharing experiences and, all these things that really happen later on, right? They really happen once you at least have the ability to engage and converse with somebody. And so, yeah, that's what I look forward to. And I just have a lot of patience for that happening. And prior to that, I'm pretty content talking to myself, practicing on my own, and building up those skills. And it's kind of a thing that, like I said, I look forward to it because I know that I'm going to be ready one day when I get the chance. But again, if I get opportunities that organically just pop up, I'm more than happy to speak with people. It's just not something that I aggressively go after. So let's talk a little bit about how I personally do this, right? How do I go about developing speaking skills without actually talking to a person? Well, the first thing is, and this is going to seem kind of obvious, but I am constantly repeating things out loud from basically day one. So if I'm doing an app, if I'm doing a textbook that's got like audio, whatever it is, if there's an example sentence or a dialogue, anything, I am just constantly repeating the language and really trying my best to focus on, pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, even things like tonality, even things like emotion, right? Like, is someone angry in the dialogue? Are they upset? Are they happy? I want to really try to mimic all these things. But the next thing I do, and this is where it starts to become very powerful for developing speaking skills, is that very early I start to manipulate those example sentences. And so if the sentence is, I would like to have lunch, then I'll do my best to, first of all, repeat that sentence, but then to change it, right? So I would like to eat dinner, or I don't want to eat dinner because I already ate, right? Like anything I can do, right? To me, it's an opportunity to just practice whatever I have. And it can be just changing the verb tense. It could be using the passive voice if I know how to do that. I'm just constantly repeating and manipulating sentences as much as I can very early on. And so even that starts to give me this comfort in producing my own sentences. Now, of course, then we start to get into dialogues, right? So maybe there are dialogues in a textbook or an app and stuff. Same thing. I'll try to go through the dialogue, but then maybe I'll try to do it a second time. But I'll try to change one of the character's lines, right? I'll try to just substitute myself in and do things like that, right? See if I can completely change the story. So that's a very basic thing that I do early on, but I do think it's very powerful, and that starts me on this journey of becoming an independent conversationalist in a language without speaking to people. Now, the next thing I do is I do actually engage in sort of drills, right, for substitution exercises, right? So I will always try to become very comfortable saying a lot of things with a little bit of language, right? So in the beginning, I'm not trying to learn 1,000 verbs, 1,000 nouns, or 10,000 this or whatever. Honestly, it's amazing how much you can say with a pretty small list of nouns, verbs, adjectives, conjunctions, whatever. Like, it's kind of incredible because if you learn how to say, I want to eat, and then if you learn to say, I want to go, and if you learn a few words like restaurant, but, afterwards, already, like, it's a pretty small selection of words. All of a sudden you can say, well, I want to go and eat at the restaurant, but I already ate a couple of hours ago, so I'll eat later. Like, there's not a lot of complexity there. And I find that what takes a long time for many people is people get very good at saying very, very short sentences, very, very short phrases, because typically that's what you're seeing in these apps and these textbooks and these courses. Very often, people struggle with saying longer, more complex sentences. But again, very often, the individual pieces of those sentences are quite simplistic. But you just need a good amount of these sort of connector words or conjunctions or different things like this. And I find that a lot of it's just simply practice. But I find that the best way to do that for me is, first of all, to be outputting these things and to kind of drill them, right? And so I'll just try to see how many different ways can I manipulate a single sentence, how many words can I substitute in. So I do a lot of that. But to be honest, all this is really just in preparation for what really starts to get interesting, which is when I do begin speaking to myself. Now, the first thing I want to do here is I would like to reframe this. Many people are uncomfortable with the idea of talking to themselves. But if you think about it, it's not that different than when you think to yourself, right? When you're thinking to yourself, it's very similar to talking to yourself. It's just your inside voice. So what I like to think of it as is thinking out loud, right? That's all it is. I am going to start thinking out loud in the language I'm learning. And I find that this framing is a lot more comfortable for people because we think to ourselves every single day, all the time, right? And so it's a much more familiar idea. So one thing you can do if this is still a bit uncomfortable is try it in your native language. So you could start by just thinking out loud in English, for example, if you're an English speaker like me, and then try to do the same thing in French or Japanese, whatever language you're learning. It's a good exercise to just get comfortable with the idea of thinking out loud in a new language. But there's a lot more to it than this. So the first level for me is pretty basic stuff. It's describing my surroundings, how did my day go, things like this. But I want to focus more on what's after that, because many people that tell you to talk to yourself, that's where they stop, right? But there's a secret key, in my opinion, or there are two keys. One is emotion and one is opinion, and of course, these two things are deeply intertwined. What I like to do is I'll take anything that I have an emotional attachment to in terms of content, right? So this could be a TV show that's in English. It doesn't have to be in a foreign language. It could be a book, it could be a video game, anything. It could be a current event happening in your country's, political system, whatever it is. But I find that stories are best because they tend to have this rich context built up around them. So what I like to do is I'll take my favorite book, my favorite movie, my favorite TV show, and I'll watch either a whole episode or just even a piece of an episode. And I'll start to think about, okay, what's my opinion? How do I feel? What do I think is the point of this episode? Because most TV shows, most movies, most books, they have a message, right? They're trying to tell you something. So what is that? And I find that this is an incredibly powerful way to start actually getting speaking practice with myself, as I start to think about, okay, so how would I tell this episode? How would I tell this story from the perspective of a different character? How would I get inside the head of this other person, and what would their perspective be? And so, many things start with, I think that, and you start just basically expressing your opinion on things that have happened. And you use this idea of manipulation, right? And so you manipulate the story, you change the perspective, honestly, it's quite remarkable how deeply you can get into a discussion with yourself when you start not just making it very boring, like, well, my day was good, I went to school, I ate lunch. No. As soon as you can, I would move on from that, and I would start engaging with genuine, thoughtful discussion about, what do you think? What do you feel, right? Or again, how did that person feel? Or how would she have felt if the story were told from her perspective? It's kind of incredible, and you'll find that this very closely mimics those types of conversations that you would like to have with a person one day. Because a lot of what we do is we tell stories, we express our opinions, we connect with people on an emotional level. Maybe someone tells us a story and then we tell a story from our own lives that is similar, right? You can get a lot of that practice, and it's great because you can do so by engaging with content you love. Like I said, it could be TV show, movie, drama in your native language or in a language you're learning. It doesn't matter. And yeah, I just find this to be really, really powerful. And like I said, this helps me to become a very independent speaker. And so what happens is, inevitably, I come across words that I don't know how to say. I come across expressions or things that I'm not sure how to express. And so I write those things down and I make it my mission to find out how can I say those in a natural way. And then I come back the next time more prepared. And I really like this because it's a completely safe space. I'm not scared of making mistakes because it's just me. No one else is around, right? I can even record myself and then listen back to it. I always hear a lot of my own mistakes and it's really powerful for helping not make the same mistake again. There's just so much you can do here. There's so much you can do and it's quite enjoyable. And I don't know, I just find that this has been so powerful and effective for me. And so, yeah, I can usually always develop a decent enough speaking level so that when I do encounter people in real life and I start to get all these opportunities, I'm ready. And then that's when my speaking skills really start to grow. Okay, everybody, I hope that was helpful. It's kind of a strange topic. I don't know. I feel like people don't talk about it very much. And I feel like people are often hesitant to engage in this. But to me, it's so liberating to know that I can get a tutor, right? I can go and find an exchange partner. I don't necessarily need to. And I can develop some really, really powerful speaking skills by myself so that one day when I decide it's time, I can go out and find all kinds of opportunities to speak and actually have really genuine, authentic interactions. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday and I'll see you back here on Friday.